L'apprentissage des langues est une compétence sous-estimée en matière de développement personnel. Apprendre une langue vous donne un aperçu culturel de la communauté qui la parle. Wait a minute, before you all leave, let me come back to English. What I meant to say was that language learning is an underrated skill when it comes to personal development. Learning a language gives you a cultural insight into the community that speaks it. You end up understanding the community at a much deeper level. You understand their traditions, you understand their customs, you understand their way of living. This knowledge itself is very important when it comes to personal development. So today, I'm going to give you 6 actionable steps that you can use to learn a language effectively. This is a method that I have been using myself to learn French and Japanese, and I know you will be able to use it as well. Without any further ado, let's get into it. Okay, the first method to use to learn languages is to identify the objective of learning a language and setting time aside every single day. Why are you learning that language? Are you learning it just to pass an exam? Or are you learning it to live in a country where your language is spoken? Or are you learning it just for understanding the history of the community? The moment you understand why you're learning a language, you will be able to actionably apply whatever steps you require for it. And to make sure you apply it every single day, set some time aside. I usually set 2 hours aside for learning all of my languages, and that 2 hours is where I'm actively learning, doing deep work. So make sure you do that as well. The second point is to learn the characters. Say if the target language has characters that is different from your mother language, make sure you learn the characters before you start understanding the language. Say if you're learning Japanese, like I am, my mother tongue, being English or Hindi, is very different from the Japanese characters. So I made it a point to learn hiragana and katakana first, learn the characters and learn what they represent, what sounds they represent. Once I got an idea of what they are, I am able to read those words which include these characters. Now I can understand. Learning all the kanji would have been very difficult at the start. But learning hiragana and katakana was not, and I can assure you it was very helpful when I started learning Japanese. Leading me to my third point, listen to stories. Listening to stories over and over again will ensure that you understand the pronunciation of the words and the context that they are used in. So say if you are trying to learn how to speak to native speakers, if you're going to learn basic textbook language, you may sound very unnecessarily formal or even outdated. But listening to stories spoken by these native speakers will give you an idea of what context these words are being used in and in what way you're supposed to pronounce those words in. Make sure you pick those kinds of stories that are not tedious for you to understand. What I usually end up doing is listening to stories that have very short dialogues. This is how I started off at the start. Picking stories with very short dialogues ensure that you're able to pick up all the words that have been said. And in this way, you can ensure you understand in what context those words are being used and how you're supposed to be using those words. Once you understand these small sentences, you can move on to more complex sentences and into more complex stories. If you're here with me and find my context interesting, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and share this content amongst all the people who you think will benefit from this. Now, back to the video. The fourth point is to listen or talk to native speakers. Now, once you've understood the context of the words that are being used while listening to these stories, the best way is to go head on and apply whatever you've learned. Talk to native speakers. To be very honest, in my experience, they will not judge you for the way you speak, but instead will give you insights on how actually these words are spoken. So if you are interested in learning a language to live in a certain country, make sure you learn to speak to these native speakers. Make sure you're able to listen to these words in the more informal sense as well. Leading me to my fifth, read smartly. Now that you have been listening to these words, now that you have been writing these as well, it is time to read them alongside. How do you start reading them? If you're reading a book, suppose, you read the first chapter throughout. Make sure you note down the words that stick out to you or you have come across previously. Look up the meanings, then reread that chapter, understand the context in which they've been used. There are multiple words in English as well. There are multiple words that are used in very different contexts. Make sure you get an idea of the context that you have been reading them in. And once you're done with that, read it a third time to make sure all the words and phrases that you have read have been assimilated in your brain. And then move on to the next chapter. I know this sounds like a tedious task, but once you get a hang of it, you will be able to effectively understand and absorb all of these words. Now, the choice of books that you should be taking. Make sure you read books that align with your interests. Say if you're interested into romance, read those books which are having stories showcasing romance. If you're say interested in finance, read books that have financial information into it. I would even suggest reading books that you already have information about or you have already read before in your mother language. Why? Because you know the context, you'll be able to understand how these words apply into that same context. My last point is to immerse yourself in that language. Sounds like a very difficult task, but once you master it, I am damn sure you'll be able to fluently speak that language. Now, how do I do this? I have already been listening to languages, I have been reading that language, I have been talking that language. Now I start thinking in that language. What do? I list down all of my menial tasks. Say if I'm going grocery shopping, my grocery list is in French. When I journal, I do that in French as well. Doing all of these tasks, my internal monologue is also in French. So this completes that entire cycle of immersion. What I also do is I try to listen to songs. I watch YouTube videos in those languages that I'm trying to learn. So I listen to a lot of J-pop, I listen to a lot of Japanese YouTubers. This ensures that I am around in that environment of that language. I've been reading that language, I've been speaking in that language, I've been listening to that language, and I'm also thinking in that language. That ensures that you will be picking up that language fast. So these are all the 6 actionable steps that you could use to learn a language. If you liked this video and found it helpful, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and share this amongst all your friends who you think will benefit from this content. As usual, all of my links are down in the description below. Thank you for watching. Happy learning.